We are the Group 1 and we're here to discuss the sectoral movement, particularly children, labor, urban poor, overseas Filipinos, indigenous people.
The children's rights movement is a historical and modern movement committed to the acknowledgement, expansion, and/or regression of the rights of children around the world. It began in the early part of the last century and has been an effort by government organizations, advocacy groups, academics, lawyers, lawmakers, and judges to construct a system of laws and policies that enhance and protect the lives of children. While the historical definition of child has varied, the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Child asserts that a child is any human being below the age of 18 years unless under the law applicable to the child. Majority is attained earlier. There are no definitions of other terms used to describe young people such as adolescents, teenagers, or youth in international law. Now, the child labor had been effectively eradicated in parts of the world. The movement turned to other things, but it again stalled when World War II broke out and children and women began to enter the workforce once more. With millions of adults at war, the children were needed to help keep the country running. In Europe, children served as couriers, intelligence collectors, and other underground resistance workers in opposition to Hitler's regime. The concept of children having particular rights is a relatively new one. Traditional attitudes towards children tended to consider them as mere extensions of the household and owned by their parents and or legal guardian, who exerted absolute parental control. This began to change during the Enlightenment when tradition was increasingly challenged and the value of individual autonomy and natural rights began to be asserted. The child must be given the means requisite for its normal development, both materially and spiritually. The child that is hungry must be fed. The child that is sick must be nursed. The child that is backward must be helped. The delicate child must be reclaimed, and the orphan and the waif must be sheltered and succored. The child must be the first to receive relief in times of distress. The child must be put in a position to earn a livelihood and must be protected against every form of exploitation. And last is the child must be brought up in the consciousness that its talents must be devoted to the service of its fellow men. While in the Philippines, approximately 23% of people make less than $1.25 per day, and women and children are especially at risk of being trafficked because of the deplorable living circumstances in many rural areas and urban slums. These women and girls are frequently the targets of contemporary slavery, which takes many different forms, including domestic servitude, forced labor, prostitution, sexual tourism, and pornography. Cebu has developed into an international hub for this horrifying and illegal sector because of its strategic location within the Philippine archipelago and its status as a developing metropolis with thousands of rural migrants. The Share a Child movement seeks to guarantee that vulnerable children and young women acquire the information, skills, and opportunities necessary to succeed by offering education, advocating for children's rights, and assisting in the development of new local livelihoods. By providing education and child rights advocacy and by helping to create new local livelihoods, the Share a Child movement works to ensure that vulnerable children and young women gain the knowledge, skills, and support they need to protect themselves from the severe dangers of poverty and build better futures for themselves and their families, so that they will enable them to become empowered individuals and to build better lives for themselves, their families, and their communities. So that's all, and thank you very much.
In countries throughout the world, including of course our country Philippines, workers have a long history of banding together to improve their working condition. Their efforts, actions, and undertakings are commonly called as labor movements. Relatively, these labor movements are organized with an aim of bringing improvements in the workplace in terms of payment, salary, benefits, work hours, and workplace safety. With this in mind, Philippines are no different from those countries where various labor movements were initiated. One of the Philippines' militant, genuine, and anti-imperialist labor movement is the Kilusang Mayo Uno, which was created in May 1, 1980. During the Marcos regime to represent progressive workers' organization in the country that advocated national democratic struggle, focusing on Philippines' labor and the issues related to it. This movement stands with the workers and peoples of the world in defending the right to strike and hold a protest and campaign as they fight for higher wages, an end to contractual employment, against illegal retrenchment, and for their trade union rights. Aside from that, the Federation of Free Workers or FFW was also established to cater labor concerns, which was founded on June 19, 1950. It is a national trade union center in the Philippines, an alliance of trade unions campaigning against contractualization of work and advocating for a significant wage increase. This Federation of Free Workers aims to empower workers to form trade unions in their respective companies to be able to fight for the rights and privileges of their workplace. Additionally, for our dear farmers, Ilusang Magbubukid ng Pilipinas or KMP was then initiated. It is a democratic militant movement of landless peasants, small farmers, farm workers, rural youths, and peasant women, which was founded on July 24, 1985. This movement carries out painstaking organizing and education work among the peasants as a requisite in building a strong democratic mass organization. It employs as well various proven effective forms of struggles and massive militant actions to uphold and protect the rights of interest of the peasants, coordinate farmers to local struggles, and campaign at the national level. Furthermore, the Fisher Folk movement, or best known in Filipino as Kilusang Mangingisda ng Pilipinas or KM, is a coalition of 8 federations and alliances of small fisher folks in the Philippines that was founded on January 2002. The coalition's agenda is to stop fish trade liberalization in the Philippines, strengthens policies that support sustainable fishery practices, and forge the broadest unity among the fisher folk sector in the Philippines. Taking all this into account, the Philippine labor movement, which was composed of labor organizations like trade unions, farmers, associations, cooperatives, and other sectoral and people's organizations, has been dealing to several labor issues. And since then, it secures that all workers, regardless of their type of job and occupation, will receive all work support and benefits they deserve. Thus, these unions have to balance the power in their economy and democracy, which was fundamentally needed right now.
Urban poor movements or urban social movements, poverty reduction and social justice. Far too little attention is given to the ways in which organized urban poor communities can advance their needs and interests across Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Urban poor groups are forming federations and social movements that are active in shelter and livelihood struggles, challenging the ineffectiveness of top-down programs and contributing their own solutions to reduce urban poverty and secure social justice. The work of these movements is relevant to development agencies and governments alike, whose current activities are failing to address the scale and depth of challenge in urban areas. Urban poor support networks and representative of organizations. 1972, SIWA or Self-Employed Women's Associations in India helps women in the informal economy to access work security, income security, food security, and essential social security. Members gain individual and collective autonomy and self-reliance both economically and in terms of their decision-making ability. 1988 ACHR or Asian Coalition for Housing Rights is a coalition of Asian professionals, NGOs, and community organizations that are committed to finding ways to secure inclusive urban development in the countries where their work is rooted. ACHR developed the Asian Coalition for Community Action or ACCA, which is now active in 165 urban centers across 19 nations. In 1993, Red LACRI or Latin American and Caribbean Network. The network aims to achieve recognition and adequate remuneration for their members' work. This in turn promotes improvements in quality of life, employment, growth of value chain, and management system by means of participative, democratic, and inclusive processes. 1996 SDI or SAC Slum Dwellers International was established by 6 national slum SAC dwellers federations or networks to build the voice and agency of these communities and women in particular. It aims to achieve inclusive cities that have the urban poor at the center of strategies and decision makings for equitable urban development. 1997 WIEGO or Women in Informal Employment, Globalizing and Organizing, a global action research policy network, seeks to increase the voice of informal women workers by helping build and strengthen their organizations and alliances while also providing supportive policies and programs and better statistical accounting and research. Is urban poor. Urban poor refers to the set of economic and social difficulties that are found in industrialized cities and that are the result of a combination of processes such as the establishment of comfortable living standards, the increase of individualism, processes of social fragmentation, and dualization of the labor. There are some causes of urban poverty or urban poor. First is poor quality or overcrowded housing, risk of forceful eviction, lack of safe, readily available water supply, poor access to proper sanitation, drainage, and solid waste collection, lack of access to government services such as healthcare, education, and security. There are some effects of urban poverty. Residents in such communities face underfunded schools, higher crime rates, substandard housing, and poorer health outcomes. The effects are particularly hard on children who attempt to cope with the high levels of stress that they experience as a result of their family's economic situation. Thank you.
With about 8 million Filipinos residing overseas, comprising 10% of the country's population of 86 million, the Philippines has one of the largest proportion of migrant workers in relation to its total population of all countries. For many Filipinos, migration is a symbol of hope because it provides an alternative to being unemployed or underemployed, living in poverty, or having a life that is qualitatively less than one's aspirations. Such remittances sent by a family member working overseas can give significant economic help to a household in the Philippines. The reason why migrant domestic workers' rights movement has been one of the favorite topics regarding about gender and migration in exploring the migrant woman as agency, not as victims of gender global migration phenomenon, especially in Asia. In line with this, the global domestic workers movement also takes place comprising domestic worker organization, trade unions, and civil society groups including migrants' rights and children's rights groups, human rights advocates, and others. Trade unions and civil society engage with governments and employers, group resistant to the convention with solid arguments and information that overcome objections too strong, binding standard, and ensure that the convention address key threats to domestic workers' rights and safety. Governments committed to domestic workers' rights and those with existing legislative frameworks that protect those rights played an invaluable role in ensuring strong global standards through the Domestic Workers' Convention. With this in mind, diverse domestic workers' rights movements operating at the grassroots, national, and regional levels have been campaigning to raise awareness on domestic workers' rights, strengthen labor organizing efforts, lobby for reforms at the local and national levels, and expand services and avenues for redress. Domestic workers' rights also has been put high on the tripartite agenda and in several countries negotiated in collective bargaining agreements winning tangible protection for domestic workers.
Now, let us move forward to indigenous peoples movement. There are numerous controversial issues encountered by the indigenous people here in our country. Since then, they had been fighting discrimination, asset stripping, and oppression. Indigenous peoples communities are generally located in distinct ancestral territories. They have high rates of unemployment, underemployment, and illiteracy. They are the group of society that under-recognized and unfunded. However, on the brighter part, in line with this is the indigenous peoples movement that are implemented not only by the indigenous leaders but also some of the local government unit. Indigenous Peoples Movement is said to be the collective action of uniting indigenous peoples from across the world to stand together and to bring awareness to the issues affecting indigenous men, women, and their children. Through the unity of indigenous people community and local government unit, legal battles, public awareness campaigns, partnerships with governments, corporations, and other organizations, indigenous lead development efforts, and a worldwide network of indigenous advocates have made huge progress in the past decades. It defended the rights, land, and social status of the indigenous community.